On one eventful night, a few students were having a study session with each other when suddenly...
Guys! I just found that we have to submit the PNS video tomorrow.
12 seconds later.
Relax lah Nabil, we can do this together.
2 hours later.
Okay guys, listen to this.
In 1963, Hans Huygens formed a program for the discovery of a peripheral acting antihypertensive agent. This led to the discovery of prazosin. In 1976, prazosin was a major advance in the treatment of mild to moderate hypertension and was distinguished from any other antihypertensive agent. As a selective alpha-1 adrenergic blocker, it was free from unfavorable effect on the blood lipid profile than other types of antihypertensive drug in use. In 1988, prazosin ranked third in the worldwide antihypertensive market. Prazosin became the laboratory standard in the adrenergic receptor research and was the key to the alpha-1 subclassification of adrenergic receptor.
Okay guys, now I'm going to explain the structure of prazosin.
The figure shown is the chemical structure of prazosin, where we will discuss each of its functional group in detail. The first functional group of prazosin is piperazine, where it is responsible for alpha-1 receptor selectivity. This functional group can be replaced with aminopropyl to increase alpha-1 selectivity. It can also be replaced by diacylpiperazine or cyclohexane-diamine for lipophilic binding at the alpha-1 receptor. However, cyclohexane-diamine can reduce drugs' potency and selectivity, while diacylpiperazine can increase prazosin affinity and selectivity toward alpha-1 receptor. Next, we move on to the functional group quinazoline, where it is responsible for the pharmacological activity of prazosin. The quinazoline will form a hydrophobic binding with a different region at the androgen receptor that normally isn't used by the natural chemical messenger. This process will cause the production of induced fit that does not activate the receptor.
The third functional group is acyl group. Acyl group is responsible in controlling the duration of drug activity. In prazosin, the R is referring to furan, where its half-life is 2.5 hours. The examples of analogs of prazosin are trazocin and doxazosin. The trazocin has a tetrahydrofuran as an acyl group with a half-life of 12 hours. Meanwhile, benzo-1,4-dioxane is an acyl group in doxazosin with a half-life of 22 hours. In general, increase in a half-life of the drugs will decrease the daily dose of the drugs. The last functional group in prazosin is amine. The importance of this functional group is for the affinity of the drugs to bind to alpha-1 receptors. Other than that, it's also important in forming the ionic bonding with those receptors.
Do you know how prazosin works?
Okay, so now let's take a look at the mechanism of prazosin. The mechanism of action for prazosin can be divided into two, which is the selective and competitive antagonist of alpha-1 adrenergic receptors, and hypotensive effects are not accompanied by reflex tachycardia. For the first part, the prazosin, which is a selective and competitive antagonist, will bind to the alpha-1 receptor on vascular muscle. The antagonist action will cause blockade of norepinephrine from binding to the postsynaptic receptor. Then, the prazosin, which is the antagonist, will bind to the receptor instead of the norepinephrine and will cause vasodilation. Then, the vasodilation will reduce the peripheral vascular resistance that will lead to the relaxation of blood vessels, allowing the blood to flow more easily. As a result, the blood pressure will be decreased.
As for the second part, hypotensive effects are not accompanied by reflex tachycardia due to, firstly, the central effect of prazosin to depress the baroreceptor feedback, and the second one is due to the lack of suppression of negative feedback mediated by the presynaptic alpha-2 receptors. Prazosin produces central effect that will depress the baroreceptor feedback, producing only small response to the heart. There will be no change in heart rate and reflex tachycardia will not occur. Next is the lack of suppression of negative feedback mechanism mediated by presynaptic alpha-2 receptors. The negative feedback mechanism is still activated and noradrenaline is not released to bind with postsynaptic receptor, minimizing the changes in sympathetic tone to the heart, and reflex tachycardia will not occur.
For your information, prazosin is also really beneficial to older people and is the best choice for those who have hypertension and benign prostate hyperplasia. Before we take a look at the mechanism of prazosin on benign prostate hyperplasia, let's find out what BPH is. BPH is the enlargement of the prostate that occurs when the cells of prostate gland begin to multiply. It will swell and squeeze the urethra and limits the flow of urine. So now, we proceed on how prazosin treats BPH. Firstly, prazosin will block alpha-1 adrenergic receptors located on smooth muscle of bladder neck and prostate and cause it to relax. Thus, there will be less pressure in urethra. Therefore, the urine flow will be increased and the patient will experience less pain.
Next, we talk about clinical indication of prazosin. According to MIMS, prazosin were best used for patients with hypertension associated with benign prostatic hyperplasia. Prazosin was best used in all generations because all men usually have benign prostatic hyperplasia and hypertension. Therefore, it can treat both problems simultaneously.
Aha! Let us move to the dose of prazosin. For hypertension problem, the initial dose is 0.5 mg 2 to 3 times daily and adjusted according to the patient response after 4 to 7 days. The maintenance dose of prazosin in hypertension patient is 3 to 20 mg daily in divided doses. For benign prostatic hyperplasia, the initial dose is 0.5 mg 2 times daily in a duration of 3 to 7 days. It can be adjusted according to clinical response. Its maintenance dose is 2 mg 2 times daily and it should not be exceeded.
But guys, there are also adverse effects of prazosin.
Adverse effects of prazosin. The main concern for elderly is postural hypotension. It occurs when a person stands up too quickly after sitting or lying down, which may lead to temporary loss of consciousness due to fall in blood pressure. Therefore, consideration should be made to give low initial dose and advise them. Other adverse effects are dizziness, headache, and nausea. Then, palpitation, which is heart is racing or fluttering. Lastly, asthenia, which is tiredness or lack of energy.
The next day.